Hello everybody, and today I've got a very exciting game with me, played between Lefu and Masiya. We all know Lefu, the 2400 lichess player, and Masiya, the USA's Blitz winner of, and both phenomenal Blitz players, and now facing each other in a friendly rapid game played about 2-3 days ago. 96 and Bishop e5 by Lefu, not d4, going for the Scotch as Masiya would with the white pieces. Knight f6 and now just castles. This line castles now allows the Berlin. D3 is like an anti-Berlin variation, but if you castle, you allow black to take this pawn on e4, and now you're going into theory pretty much. But well, d4 is a way to play if you want to open up the e-file. Force this knight to d6, and just to quickly show, after these trades and king takes d8, there's a line, this line, which leads to an endgame very quickly. But it's very drawish. Black has got the bishop here, but worse pawn structure and king that is slightly awkward at the moment. But it's been very tricky to really prove white's advantage in this position. And I must add that I think there are about 4,000 games in the lichess master database with this specific position. So in any case, Lefu doesn't go for this d4 line. He goes rook e1. And that also forces that knight to d6, and we have knight takes e5. Not bishop e7 by Masiya, which could allow some other variations for white, but knight takes e5 specifically, and rook takes e5 check, then bishop e7. He could have played bishop e7 when I said so earlier, and also just reached this position. So, but by taking the knight immediately and not going bishop e7, he forces white to recapture, and he knows he gets this position with bishop f1. You can probably play bishop d3, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're really super strong and know how to get out of the doubling of these pawns and stuff like that. So, but Lefu plays bishop f1. My point just now was that in this position, bishop e7 was possible, but that could mean that Lefu could come up with a different move or something else, I don't know. And so bishop knight takes e5 is a very concrete way of playing by Masiya, making sure he goes into a line that he knows. And Lefu plays his bishop back to f1. This is still all theory. This bishop is actually still pretty active, guarding this g2 pawn. It's out of the way for now, not restricting the rook from going back to e1 as if it was an e2. So this position has been seen a few times, and both players obviously know their prep. We have castles and then d4. And this is kind of the situation, or the first position where black kind of gets to call the shots with what to do theoretically. Masiya goes for a sideline with b6, but also possible was knight e8 or bishop f6. But b6 played, and now the first novelty of the game, bishop to d3. Eyeing that h7 square, can also realize this queen can jump in with tempo against that king. In any case, now instead of bishop to d3, other moves have been stuff like knight c3 or just c3. But this bishop moves now for the third time in the opening, and it feels funny, but actually it's perfectly timed in my opinion. We have bishop to b7, bishop f6 also possible, and the point is that there's potential for like weird sack exchanges, but in most of the lines I went through, white always has a lot of compensation, for instance this position. So bishop e7 simply by Masiya, not going bishop f6, looking for trouble with this sacrifice. We have knight c3, but now bishop f6. Okay, so what does Lefu do? Well, he gives up the exchange in a weird way. Queen h5. Obviously black can't take this immediately because that would be plundering mate on h7. So g6 first, but now after queen g4, the exchange is actually being given up, and it's worth actually going through this line. Masiya decided not to take the piece, but after knight e8, well, you kind of need to do this to start guarding some of these weak points, because this bishop and queen will be slicing in quickly. I see the computer's quick analysis said knight here, but I can't see that that's good. So there's a way to win back the material. Bishop g5, and if the queen moves, well, then that rook is trapped. You're getting back the exchange. And if f6, which the computer recommends, you can simply play bishop h6 and just enjoy this very airy king and these stunning bishops. Definitely getting material back. So Masiya sees this, and although I don't think it would have been too bad to take the rook over here with bishop takes e5, he goes knight e8. Okay, and now Lefu goes rook e1, and this is actually pretty nice. It's the second time in the game he's just thrown a piece back and kept his position quite stable. The piece is still active. It has been a retreating move, but it's still occupying this file. I did analyze rook h5 and rook e3 via h3, but it's white doesn't get enough play immediately, and the rook actually becomes quite awkward along the h file. The e file seems like a bigger asset, and also pretty importantly, for instance, in the rook e3 line, this bishop is suddenly not part of the game. So rook e1, a very sound move, makes sense. And d5 by Masiya. I'm not completely convinced by d5. I feel you need to play it, but yeah, okay. It immediately just hampers this bishop, but you cannot really afford to give white too much play along this diagonal with or give up that square. So sorry. In any case, d5 and bishop h6, bishop g7 now, and I'm not sure why bishop g7 was necessary. Knight g7 looks just as fine. In any case, the bishop g7, and Lefu quite correctly trades this bishop. That's black's bishop that's actually holding this king side together, and now we can start feeling black's king is slightly airy. Compare it to white's king. Knight e2 starts rerouting this knight. Knight f6. Oh, by the way, sorry. After bishop takes g7, also knight takes g7. I don't know why Masiya didn't opt for this. I cannot really tell. My thoughts were specifically, I want this knight on e6, and I want to be able to play c5. But king takes g7, probably nothing wrong with it. Maybe in some world you're trying to play f5 and then knight to f6, but in the game, after knight e2, just knight f6 immediately, and I was never really sure how you're making progress as black. Knight f6 and queen f4. White is still comfortable. That's the main point behind Lefu's play so far, and now c5 countering or hitting against that census. c3. Do not trade here. You don't want this bishop's eyes opening up. You want to keep it a bad piece. So therefore c3 and rook e8. Knight to g3. Starting to really just pry at this king. You're going to get h5 soon. And now queen d7. And maybe just quickly pause the video here for a second. See if you can find a winning move here for Lefu. This is the first time in the game he's actually getting an opportunity to walk away with the game. I'll give you guys like 2 seconds. I also do have water here. Okay, so the winning move here is knight f5 check, and it's really just devastating if black decides to take the knight, because then we have queen g5 check. Both moves to the king are very bad. King f8 is bad because now suddenly we're threatening queen h8 mate. Realize that these squares are being cut off, and it's actually one of those situations where there's really just one move that seems to hold things together for the while, but just look at those scattered pawns, the pawn islands of blacks, and white is just going to be chopping them away and playing with 3 connected passes. This pawn's going, you don't want to trade this rook. This is just a nightmare if you take the knight. So taking the knight's not an option. Well, king h8 can be tried, and this is actually the only line that seems to work really well. And white has a super strong move now, knight to d6. And we can see it's just hitting all these pieces while the white queen's hitting this knight with check. So now knight to h5, only real move to hold on to material, but it becomes pretty vicious after knight takes f7 check. King g7, queen h6 check. Don't take this knight, because this is just dropping a queen. So king needs to go back, I think, to g8. And, well, this is just a stunning position for white. I think he can just play knight e5 and say, well, I'm going to sack on g6. My knight is this brilliant piece on e5. This is a nightmare position for black. Just honestly so bad. In any case, so it is probably defendable for the while, but even just queen d2 seems good. And compare white's pieces to black's, and you can realize the advantage. In any case, that is this type of initiative that Lefu could have gotten in this position if he had seen knight f5, but he didn't. He played h3. h3 makes sense. You want to play g4 later. The pawn's defended, and you won't be able to play g4 later if your pawn's on h4. So that's why not an h4 advance with h5 in mind, because black might just play h5 himself, and then all your ideas are dead. So h3 quite a good move to keep ideas open. And also, here Masiya trades rooks and tries to go for an endgame. Rook e5, played by Lefu not to go for this. Well, Masiya decides, okay, it's okay to have that isolated pawn on e5. But now Masiya plays knight to g8, and I'm not completely sure I like this move too much. Knight to e8 seemed to make a bit of sense to me compared to g8. But here I must mention that Masiya's now he has a minute on the clock compared to Lefu's about 7 minutes. So Lefu's been playing quickly, been playing very active moves, although it's been retreating moves, just keeping his position simple. While Masiya's been doing tricky things that I'm not completely always sure what the point is. Knight g8. This is really these squares, and then your idea is probably to f4, but even then I'm not convinced. So I was thinking knight e8 here with an idea of maybe going knight e7, knight e6, and well, then you're pretty comfortable. You're hitting the queen. It's a good defensive role for this knight to take in. Yet again, the point is that you can even push d4 then. The knight is active on the queen side as well. In any case, knight to g8 was played in the game. Lefu plays queen g5 now, and here king f8 is played. I don't completely agree with king f8. It feels like I'm dissing all of Masiya's moves now, but he played really well defensively for under a minute here. A more precise move would have been h6, but this would have been tricky to see with under a minute on the clock, and well, it seems like there are loads of threats, especially knight h5 comes to mind. Check because of this, and then obviously you're seeing stuff like this fork, and you don't want to go for it, but actually you have king f8, and now suddenly both queen and knight are being hit, you're getting some material. And if after h6 knight f5 is played, well, see if you can find the winning move. This one's quite simple. Queen takes f5, and you're just winning a piece because white's queen is still being attacked, and well, this is just bad. So king f8 played instead of h6. I feel like h6 would have been quite an improvement. The position here is still equal, but king f8, and we start marking a turn for the worse. Still, Lefu's position is more natural, and now, well, things start going wrong for Masiya. h4, and queen e7 tries to get the queens off. Good idea. When your opponent's attacking you, try to get rid of the pieces that are attacking you. And now h5 by Masiya to stop that pawn of white from going to h5 itself. So he plays h5 to stop this idea. In fact, h5 is a blunder. Bishop to c8 is a move I like. In any case, h5 is a blunder, and the reason why you can maybe try and find, I'll give another 2 seconds. Okay, so bishop takes g6 is the problem here, and that is exactly what Lefu played. The pawn is pinned. It's just a free pawn, and now it's actually just tickets for both of these pawns. They're both isolated now. All of white's pieces are coordinating. This king is now very exposed. One simple pawn move and your defense is kind of over. And it felt like you needed to play it to stop h5, but in fact it's not really necessary. Something like bishop c8 I liked quite a lot. When analyzing this position, I thought to myself, well, white has got one big perk maybe in this position, and that is this outpost, but it's actually quite tricky to get the knight there. We'll see so later on as well. Bishop c8 would have been quite fun here. In any case, h5, and now bishop takes g6. Masiya plays d4 here. Yet again, this is now a move out of desperation, trying to get this piece more active. But instead of d4, just maybe queen e6, giving up another pawn, and bishop c8 again is my defensive idea so far. But it can become pretty bad. This is just if nothing happens. Queen f5, this would be a line white would want to go for. In any case, if black doesn't want to trade queens and keep queens on, something like g4 might come, and we can just see white's attack is progressing very naturally here. But it's better I think than well, h5. Bishop c8 and queen e6 ideas are better than d4. But in any case, the game starts falling flat. after h5, bishop takes, and now d4. Trying some ideas there. We have just a trade by Lefu and bishop back to d3. The idea is pretty simple. He just wants to go after the d4 pawn. Doesn't want to worry about the pinned piece. And Masiya sees it, queen to b4. And now Lefu plays e6, trying to make use of this tactic. Black's king and is now very exposed, and holding on to all of these pieces is quite tricky. Even the king g7 scapegoat can be met by knight h5. Masiya goes for this pawn on e6. In fact, Lefu could have won the game, I think, more easily with king h2, and after queen takes e6, played bishop to f4, f5. The point being that Black's queen cannot communicate with the back rank so well, and queen e8 itself also loses pretty sorely because of queen d6 check. And even if you try queen e7 to hold on to the pieces, I think you can just play queen b8. Yeah, and after king g7, you don't want to move the queen because of the piece. And now just something like bishop d3. This seems like a long line, but even queen takes h4 check, king g1, and knight. Well, there's a threat. That's why the bishop went back for this fork. Knight h6, and well, just queen takes. It's just a bit tricky to hold on to all of the pieces here after this line. In any case, way back here in the game, after queen e1 check, bishop f1 was played, not king h2, which would have been more active and slightly more secure. But queen takes e6 played, and now just queen takes d4, going after that pawn. Remember now the bishop went back to f1, and I think it's the bishop started on f1 in the game, then moved away, then came back, then moved away, then came back. So it's defended now, and it's quite importantly defending this g2 pawn, as Masiya is now 30 seconds on the clock. This bishop's now just defending that one threat he made, and you can start trying to wiggle more pawns. I think that's Lefu's idea, try and get this one up further. So in the game, knight f6 is played to defend that pawn, and b3, trying to make the c4 square more active. You can go after that h5 pawn later. And here Masiya tries one last idea, trying to trade queens, just play down one pawn while you're threatening checkmate. But what do we know? Checkmate is not being threatened, and you can go for that knight on f6. And Lefu wins a very nice game. Masiya resigns in this position. There's no mate. He just blundered that last piece, and things are just collapsing now. This is just devastating. In any case, I think this was a very nice game. Lefu played very active chess. Didn't sacrifice much, but always kept his pieces active and available to do the right thing at all times. So it was a good lesson in active pieces, although they are retreating. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. There will be more games coming, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks for watching.